All right, hey everybody, how you all doing out there? Welcome back to Inside the Matrix. Today, my special guest is Jim Gale, and a big shout out to Lindsay, our mutual friend out there, who put us together for this show. We so appreciate her, and she is awesome in her own right.
She is.
So, hi, Lindsay. Hope you get to see this. Anyway, Jim Gale, just a fascinating guy, a really forward-thinking man. And when I heard about his story, I thought to myself, this is somebody that people need to know about, and people need to know about what he's up to, what kind of thinking that he's bringing to our minds that we need to know, especially at this time here in our history of crazy world stuff. So anyway, Jim, welcome to the show, Jim
Well,
Gale.
thank you, Jimmy. And again, thank you, Lindsay. Lindsay's amazing. And I'm so honored and happy and inspired to be on your show to share this message with your audience and frankly, as many people globally as possible. That's my job in life, is to share this inspired message, which almost everybody will leave this show with a raised vibration and feeling better, and also with action steps towards freedom.
Absolutely. So, what I always do on our show, Jim, our listeners out there who are regular listeners, they will know. I always ask our guests to kind of take us back to kind of where you came from. What your family life was like, how you got to where you are now, because your story is a fascinating one. So, I'll just let you take it from here.
Okay, sounds good, buddy. So I grew up in Minnesota, and I grew up on a lake. They called me Nature Boy. My dad is a pipe fitter. My mom was a stay-at-home mom until I was in my teens. Then she became a realtor. So a very normal suburban lifestyle growing up. What happened that was very profound, that changed my life, I got into wrestling, and that made a huge difference. I remember when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, and my wrestling coach, Tony Nelson, said, "Jim, you have the ability, but you don't listen well." Because I had ADD. Now to this day, I cherish my ADD, because it just gets me to focus on what I want to focus on and not what some governmente wants me to focus on. But when he said it, he was my wrestling coach and I liked wrestling. So I actually said, okay, I'm going to listen to you, coach, because that was the thing, right?
Yep.
Fast forward about 10 years later, and my college wrestling coach, Dr. Gary Rushing, had everybody in the room write down their goals. Now, I had not been exposed to goal writing. And when he first handed everybody the piece of paper, it was 3 pages, actually. It was a fairly detailed goal sheet. And I was like, oh, shit, more paperwork, right? I hated school. I just could not my mind was too exciting to pay attention to what was going on in front of the room. And that was a battle that the teacher never won. There's a few teachers, but most of the teachers could not win that battle. So anyway, put it on my desk, went and got really drunk on a Friday night, got really drunk all day Saturday. Sunday comes along and recovering from the crazy weekend, playing cribbage and having pizza. And all of a sudden I'm looking at this thing and it's nagging me. It's saying, "Jim, you got to come fill this out." It's for wrestling. So I had to. Anyway, when I started writing, at first with consternation, but soon something twisted in my head, because I started picturing myself in the future in a way that inspired me. So to make the long story short, I ended up being a 4-time All-American and national wrestling champion, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And the person who left the room on Friday night and the person who showed up in the room on Monday morning were 2 different people. Right. So fast forward again, then I traveled. I went and lived with the Maasai in Africa, and after college in Hawaii for 4 years, and did a lot of just fun mid-20s, 20s partying and stuff like that. Then I wrote my goals again when I was 29. And this time I was living in Surfers Paradise, Australia, and I was driving to Bond University, and I was just going in their library, and I was reading Think and Grow Rich and Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and Dennis Waitley. The Psychology of Winning still gives me the chills. Man, that was so powerful. And I started reading for the first time in my life. I started actually just devouring this knowledge of these great people that had been so globally influential. And it blew my mind. I'm like, why isn't this everywhere, right? So I wrote my goals, and I had bartending experience and a teaching degree. And so when I wrote my goals that I wanted to have $3 million in 3 years, when I got home, I was living with my buddies in a cheap place where we all shared a place for $300 a month, right, each. And I was telling them my goals, and they were engineers, pretty successful, had $60,000 a year jobs, and I was pretty much broke. And they said, "You're crazy, Jim. That's impossible. That's not how the world works." But it didn't matter because it was already too late. I had already learned from the greats. And 3.5 years later, the mortgage company, which I started with no industry knowledge, nothing. It was really kind of amazing how that all played out. The universe, when you create a compelling vision for yourself in the future that inspires you forward, the universe will open up, and the reticular activating system of your brain will point you in the direction by making things important that are in alignment with the goal. Right. So I wrote that goal. We did $1.3 billion in gross revenue. Now, I only went from zero. I say only because it's still a lot, from zero to about $20 million in net worth over that 5-year period. So I wasn't a billionaire, but I thought that I would never have to work again. I thought that things were good. And I mean, I thought that it was just going to go up from there until 2008. I was heavily invested in the Costa Rican real estate market. I had no financial education, right? I put all my eggs in one basket because I loved the basket. The basket was the Costa Rican jungle. And I loved the nature of it. The cicadas, the rhythm of the jungle, how I felt there was just incredible. So I bought all this land, thousands of acres of land, and start developing these different pieces. 2008 comes along, and it all goes more than flat. Like from the Coldwell Banker, for instance, had a bunch of realtors. They went from dozens of deals per month to one closing in 6 months. Like that's how bad it was, like gone. So then I started asking new questions, which I learned from these greats. Like, what is the solution? What are people looking for? How can I need to do something. And I also began living in fear at that time. And I'd never had fear. And the reason that I started living in fear is because I had my first 2 daughters. The real estate market had crashed, and I had lost probably 75% of my 20 million within about a year and a half period. And I learned permaculture, and via permaculture, I learned that the way we are destroying our planet via the use of poisons and ignorance is unsustainable. And I learned the definition of sustainability. A sustainable system is one that creates more energy than it takes to create and maintain. So an unsustainable system is equal to death. And I realized that the way we're mining our soil and all these different things, deforestation, that is a direct path to the systemic collapse of our society. Now, I still didn't know that there's actually people behind this agenda. At that time, I thought it was mostly just based in ignorance, maybe not so much in psychopathic evil or evil or whatever the hell. So I went down this rabbit hole. I learned that, for instance, I learned about Building 7, and I could not get that out of my mind. You cannot have a building that doesn't get hit by a freaking plane fall into its own footprint at free fall speed. The thousands of architects and engineers around the world who have signed these documents saying that's impossible, it was a controlled demolition, is all I needed to know. Besides, my own eyes told me that that was a demolition. So I went down that rabbit hole, and I had cognitive dissonance, and everything I learned about the Bellamy Salute, the Pledge of Allegiance, all these things, I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So I went basically down over the next several years, maybe actually 6 or 7 years. I was trying new things, but I was trying everything from a more of an effort and scarcity mindset. And this is so huge for everybody, because the biggest control mechanism of our world is fear. And when we can rise our energies, our vibrations above fear, and by the way, fear and ignorance are the same thing, right? So when we can start rising above that, so what I did is I ended up getting credit cards. I ended up maxing out everything and literally going down to negative about $90,000 until about 7 months ago. And since then, millions of dollars have flowed in again. Like I went from nothing to way up here to negative nothing. And now it's happening again. Thanks to one main point is releasing the fear, meditating, feeling my hands, and starting to trust the messages that were coming from someplace divine.
That's absolutely, I love that. That just blows me away. It's such a great story, and it makes so much sense. We have to get out of our own way, so many times, and fear is such a powerful tool, and we're seeing it being used all the time now. I mean, that's the mainstream media. That's every day we're being hit with it. Fear, be afraid of this, be afraid of that, and now do what we say because you're scared. So that's exactly what's going on. But then
Yes.
let's continue on, because you went in a direction that is so beneficial for people to understand nowadays, right?
Yes. Yeah. Problem, reaction, solution, right? You create the problem, there's a reaction, and then you force the solution, mandate and violence the solution into being. So the whole time, I'm an optimist. Now I really resonate with optimism massively, like completely. I just settle into it. But even when I was going through the shit, I knew that I had this faith that something was going to click at some point. I had actually 7 ayahuasca ceremonies, and I had I was really just trying to dig into my soul and find out what the fucking problem was, right? And bit by bit, I shedded, like peeling away layers of an onion with tears and everything. I shedded that bullshit, those shackles, those chains of literally govern, which means to manage or control, and mente, which means mind. I finally shed that shit. And 6 months ago, our company launched, and this was very strategic and intentional. Do you know who Del Bigtree is?
Oh yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
he's one of
Dell
my.
Dell is a awesome fighter. Yeah, and he's a big ally in our cause, right?
He's one of my many heroes in this world. And I got to take a breath. I get emotional just thinking about this whole process. So I actually knew Dell was going to be in Florida. So I wrote a speech to give at the same platform he was on, not knowing anybody who was setting up the show or anything, but I'm just like, I'm going to go for it, right? I met Dell and I said, Dell, I'd like you to read this speech. I bought him a beer and he sat with me and he just hung out and he read the speech and he said, Jim, you got something here. And next thing you know, he's flying his film crew to Florida and then me to Texas. And we installed a food forest and we created a show that went global. That was 6 months ago. Since then, our company now is serving people and helping to create. In fact, I'm going to back up just a little bit. I'm going to frame this because this is the answer to all of the problems of our world, right? Victor Hugo, a long time ago, said, there's one thing stronger, more powerful than all of the armies of the world. And that is an idea whose time has come. Now, that statement it presupposes that the idea was already in existence. And guess what? Everybody I've ever talked to in my life not only knows of the idea, but can describe the idea in glorious detail. And yet, they have been programmed to believe that the idea is a utopian fantasy, that it is a myth. My friends, the Garden of Eden ideal is not a utopian fantasy. It's the next logical step for humanity. So we created a food forest at Dell's place. And we're serving people in now 16 or 17 countries. We are in 40 some states. We have had epic, monumental viralness going on because people recognize the truth of it. Yet, a lot of us are programmed to believe we have a black thumb, we have a brown thumb, we don't have the time, the space, the money. All of that BS, bad science, belief systems, and bullshit is what we are here to blow away. It's bullshit. A fruit tree takes less maintenance than a lawn and can provide an incredible yield. And when we stack it all together using permaculture principles, which have been proven all over the world, literally, this world is going to be a world of epic abundance in the years to come.
That's so true. And when I saw your special show that you did with Del Bigtree, I was just blown away. And so people need to understand that what you do and what your company does, and I want you to get into more detail about it, but it's really about designing spaces, designing spaces for that people have, whether it's just a small plot of land or it's acres or whatever it is, in whatever region or part of the world you're in. You guys designed the plants and the trees and everything that will grow there and will sustain them permanently with very little effort so that they can be self-sufficient in growing their own food. That is so important and amazing. We've gotten so far away from that in our society. People we just go to the grocery store. Well, what happens when they disrupt that food chain and the trucks aren't coming in anymore? These are the things we need to be thinking about, and you're already way ahead of the game. So I'll let you pick it up from there.
Awesome. You nailed it. When we transition 20-30% of the 40 to 50 million acres of lawn in the United States alone into regenerative edible landscapes, what we like to call food forests, we reverse deforestation, we reverse mass extinction, we reverse heart disease and cancer and diabetes trends, and we literally take out from under them their forms of tyranny and control. We take back our health. And what was it, Kissinger, who said 50 some years ago, he said, if you want to control nations, control oil. If you want to control people, control food. And he went on to say, if you want to control the world, control the world's currency. And what is the currency? But it is the representation of the stored value of the productivity of the people, right? And, and on top of that, it was Goethe who said, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. And when you pack and unpack all these and meditate with them and really understand the depth of these things, then we start to realize that we have been slaves to the governmente, the warmongers of our world, the military industrial complex, and they're all owned by the same exact people, right? So that's the problem. In permaculture, you find out what the problem is, and then you do the opposite of that. Centralized food is the core of our enslavement. Decentralized food is at the foundation of our freedom.
Yeah, and I think we've gotten to the point now where more and more people are seeing the control mechanisms of the world, and that they're actually having to suffer through what's being imposed on us. And I think it's because of the fact that more people are waking up, that the bad guys have decided to accelerate their game in a big way, and and step it up. But perhaps they don't realize, or maybe they do, I'm not sure, but by doing that, they've been waking people up in a very fast fashion too. So this is a very interesting battle that we have going on, and of course, I'm sure you would agree, this is a spiritual battle that we're involved in.
Yes.
And so it's up to us to educate ourselves, to understand the situation. And that's what, shows like this are about. This is what you're about. This is what all of us who want to be free, this is what we do. We share information with each other. We try and empower each other and, make life better in any way that we possibly can. But we really need to understand the situation that we're in. And that situation is not a good one. We're being imposed upon in many ways. And of course, in Florida, you guys are very lucky to have such a great governor that is pushing back and fighting back against these globalists who want to impose their, New World Order communism on all of us and destroy our economies and basically make us all a bunch of peasants while they live the life of luxury, all that. And, 5 years ago, if you would have mentioned that to most people, they would say, oh, that's just crazy talk. What's wrong with you? You paranoid schizophrenic, you?
They did.
Yeah, and then but now it's like,
Yeah.
there might be something to that, maybe, people are starting to see, which is great. We've got more media channels that are grassroots based, that are popping up and telling people the truth. And that's why we love sharing this kind of information. And what you're doing is so great. And so run us through, let's talk about your website first, and then run us through a scenario of somebody who gets in touch with you and say, hey, I got an acre next to my house. What do I do with it? Let's talk about that.
Yes, so I'll bust down a few of the most common belief systems.
Okay.
One is about, oh, I don't have much land. Okay, so sometimes that's a big deal. If you don't have any grass or any soil in your property, or if you don't own a property, then it's going to be a lot harder to grow a lot of food. So, but as for an example, at Galt's Landing, we are developing what, in my understanding, is the first of its kind luxury off-grid community. And we're doing this to be a demonstration site for freedom at every level. We're planting thousands of edible plants throughout the property. We're going to have everything that we need to live, not just live, but to thrive. We're going to create the Garden of Eden type of vision everywhere. And it's all off-grid food, water, and energy throughout the whole 52 acres. So, what we did there to start is we put about maybe a 700 square foot circle on the ground, a food forest. And we put cardboard on the cattle pasture, and then we put soil on top, we put hay on top of that, and we put the plants in the best we could. It was a last second type of thing. The first 2 months, it was kind of dry out. We had to go there several times and make sure the plants got water. We ran a little thing from the lake to the thing so they got water. After that, a lawnmower we hired came and ripped up the hose. For the last 14 months, we have done literally no maintenance. The only thing we did is cut a trail around it because it became a jungle of food. And so we're talking about, this is how it should be everywhere. I mean, there's longevity spinach running on the ground. There's turmeric, which fights cancer better than chemotherapy, according to some peer-reviewed studies, right? And if I was selling turmeric, I could go to jail for saying that, which is just insane. It's the Garden of Eden just right there. Now that is a zero maintenance one. Most people don't want that type of food forest. Most people want to turn their backyards into a designed, landscaped food forest. And if all we did were turn our ornamentals into functional plants that provided habitat and more flowers and food, then that alone would radically change our HOA developments and our landscapes. So let's say somebody says, I would like to grow food in my backyard. We will set them up with one of our designers. We are a design company, and everything starts with design. And then our designer will talk to that person and find out, number one, what agricultural zone are they in? Plants that live naturally in Florida, most of them don't live naturally in Minnesota. So we find out what ag zone, and then next we find out what their goals are. Do they want to have a hands-off food forest, or do they want to stack functions and use their food forest as a tool for their mental well-being? Right? Everybody I know who has a food forest, they want to be in the food forest. They just go stand in the food forest. My partner, Dr. Ian Scott, our lead designer and our design team support leader, he has a food forest on 1/10 of an acre that has 63 different types of edible and medicinal plants. And he has trails through the backyard, and he goes out there half an hour a day. And he just looks around. Once in a while, he'll pick something that he doesn't want there. Once in a while, he'll do some pruning. But it's so easy to manage these systems.
Yeah, and just to be out there in that energy of these plants and trees, and what a great place to meditate, just being outside like that. Of course, as long as it's not freezing cold.
Yeah.
But when it's nice out, it's just so great to be in the energy of all those plants. And then, of course, you're going to attract birds and other animals to come and join you, which is always fun to do.
Absolutely.
So you guys design, somebody comes to you, they have a plot of land, you guys can help them design what plants and trees will grow in their area and thrive with very little maintenance. So, that is such a great thought and a thing to do. So I'm very inspired by what you have to say. Now we're up against, so many things. When you talk about being self-sufficient, we want to be self-sufficient energy-wise. We want to be self-sufficient food-wise and water-wise. But we've got these crazy laws in different places where you can't be off the grid, and all that kind of stuff. So we've got some more work to do where we've got to push back on these people. Not only we've got to push back on these insane mask mandates, the vaccine mandates. I mean, this is literally, in case you don't know out there, you've been living under a rock somewhere. This is about depopulation. This is about money making. This is about making everybody sick, making permanent customers for the pharmaceutical companies. All of these things. This is what's really going on. So we've got to address these things head on. We've got to push back any way and every way that we possibly can. And, what you're doing is a huge step forward. Now, what about water systems? Do you guys get into any of that?
Yes, in multiple ways. All paths to freedom must include what I'm talking about. I mean, it's really the foundation is to be decentralized. Water, many different ways. The most permaculture style way is to create swales, which are just ditches dug on contour. They could be a foot wide or they could be several meters wide. It just depends on where and how big of a system that they want to support. And then as it rains, the water will drain into the swale and it'll slow down the water and it'll sink the water into the ground. And over time, your ground becomes saturated. It's like a sponge, and it's a beautiful thing because everything below the swale then has a source of water. We also love water catchment off of the roof. And if you're in a state that says that's illegal, whatever, right? I'm sorry, but there's no way they're going to stop me from doing what is best for my family and logical on every level. And if they come after me and say, hey, you got to take that down, we're going to have a hell of a show on our hands, because with my growing popularity and this vision, this message popularity, I'm going to take that whole thing all the way to the highest level. And they're going to wish they didn't fight me on it. Again, and two, what I would like to leave people with, and not that, we can talk for as long as you want, but I want people to know that this is about, number one, raising above fear into faith and courage, right? If you're fearful right now, then start making lists, start writing goals, list of positive things, start writing goals, start using the words appreciation and joy and love in your day. Catch the programs, turn off. If you're watching any of the mainstream media crap, even most of these television shows, turn that poison off and go stand in nature. That's it. And if you can rise above fear, then you'll be able to see clearly towards something beautiful.
Oh, so well said. And I think we're just going to leave it there because your message is so well taken and so important for everybody out there. And I know everybody's going to be excited about that and going to want to find out a whole lot more. So tell us about your website, where they can find you, and send you an email, contact you, get some advice, information and all that.
Awesome. I'll share a couple things, miraculous things, just to show you that this is not only possible, but it's happening. This is the idea whose time has come, and it's going global. And so the synchronicities, the cooperative incidences, right, which some people like to slough off as coincidences, are happening every day, all day long. For instance, here's a big one. I didn't watch much TV growing up, but I had my favorite shows. And one of them was The Crocodile Hunter with Steve Irwin.
Oh, yeah.
And so after the High Wire show aired, I get a call from the producer of The Crocodile Hunter saying, Jim, we would like to turn our attention to you and make a show around your vision for society. I said yes instantly, because this is the type of magic that I expect and intend and strategize to come. All right. 2 days later, and that was my favorite TV show for like 10 years. 2 days later, I get a call from the actor of my other favorite TV show, which is like 10 years later. And he says, Jim, I'd like a food forest. I'd like to talk to you about filming it and all that. I said, oh my gosh, guess what? We're not even 7 months in, and we've already finished a TV pilot that is going to inspire millions. It's going to blow the world away. The co-star, the guy, the movie star that called me up, he's thrilled. We created in his yard. a food forest that can produce like 300 bottles of wine a year and about over 100 different species of plants. So that kind of miracle stuff is happening. And then in order to scale this vision, we had to create the structure. And that's where my experience with the mortgage company helped, because we scaled so fast from me and my mom's basement to 480 loan officers in 3 years. And so we use that same, what I learned from that experience. And we have a business model called a food forest cooperative. And the co-op is fantastic because it's a landscaping business, but it's a functional landscaping business. It's a food forest business. It's really easy to do because our designers create the blueprint, like a house blueprint.
Yep.
And then all the landscaper has to do, the food forest cooperative has to do, is follow the blueprint and put the plants in the ground. And the margins are typically 40%. And it's a very lucrative business to be in. It's also incredibly timely. So our business, our website is foodforestabundance.com. And we turn over the money. I don't ever want to be one of those companies that store billions of dollars or $1 trillion. If we took 1% of the money that Apple has stored, we could change the world overnight. We could have food forests in every major city in the world with educational, inspiring content that would make people say, this is the answer, right? So we're doing a lot of food forests in public areas, food banks and churches and community centers. That's our give back. And then we turn that give back into marketing, inspiring, so it just keeps going and going and going.
Awesome. In a word. Yeah, that's great. And we'll put a link in the description down below for your website so people can go check that out. And I'm really happy to hear that you're getting such great response. And of course, it only makes sense because what you're talking about is what needs to happen everywhere. And we'll continue along those lines. So Jim Gale, keep doing what you're doing. We really admire and respect you, and we're glad that you're here on the planet with us, or the plane, like I like to say. And until next time, everybody, we'll see you inside the Matrix. Take care.
Thank you.